Thank you for being here today. And Dave, I'm a big fan of your work dating back to Entertainment Weekly with the Oscar.
Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate that.
But my question is, if you had to give 3 film recommendations out of the program on TCM or HBO Max for someone who's not familiar with classic film, and this is for the both of you, what would those recommendations be?
We actually even did this. Okay. I found mine. So so here are 3 that I would say that people should watch. One is The Red Shoes. It's a movie from the 40s, but it feels like it's a movie from now. It's this beautiful ballet film by Powell and Pressburger with phenomenal color, phenomenal dance sequences, and a globe-trotting love story, and it's just beautiful. So that's a great one for people who might be a little afraid of a black and white movie. I also love The Best Years of Our Lives, a Best Picture winner about 3 men returning from war and trying to reacclimate to their pre-war lives. It's powerful and a beautiful film that is easily accessible for anyone. And then I would recommend the movie, a more current movie, Antoine Fisher, which we're showing on HBO Max, directed by Denzel Washington, an absolutely gorgeous true story with phenomenal performances, and a movie that I was convinced 19 years ago was going to get a ton of Oscar nominations, and I was completely wrong. And I will never understand why that movie did not take off more than it did, because I think it's beautiful. I hope people discover it, because it's one of the movies that we're calling a discovery as on the festival lineup this year. Those are my 3.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to not repeat any of Dave's answers. Those were great. So opening night, West Side Story. I mean, it's one of the most just visually striking. It shows a real kind of maturity with regard to the way that the musical developed over time. And I think that there's a new version that's going to be released soon, the Steven Spielberg version. I always feel like you should see earlier iterations of something before you see a remake. So my poor children are constantly watching multiple versions of things. West Side Story, just right off the bat. I have to champion a silent film because that's my area of specialty. We're showing the Ernst Lubitsch film, So This Is Paris, which I think is the kind of film that can really change the way that people think they know about silent films. It's just incredibly dynamic and engaging. The acting is just spectacular. And Ernst Lubitsch, who is one of the most important directors in the history of filmmaking, and has such an important kind of personal story as an immigrant filmmaker. We can see how what came to be known as the Lubitsch touch, these kinds of really witty, sophisticated romantic comedies that he directed, we see how he's developing that even during the silent period. And it also has this really crazy Charleston kind of musical number. People don't necessarily think that silent films have musical numbers, but this one does. So I definitely want to direct people to that film. And then, we have an essentials kind of like collection of films that's going to be screened on HBO Max. And one of those is my favorite Hitchcock film, North by Northwest, which I think is just, he loved trains and clocks. It's a film that is paced just perfectly. And Cary Grant's always amazing to watch. And it's a film that I think will really help people to understand the complexity and just the care that Hitchcock brought to his work. So that's one that I could watch over and over and over and over again. And I've taught precisely because I think that it's such a masterful film.
Okay, Jeffrey Howard.
Hey everyone, Jeff in Las Vegas. How are you this morning?
All right, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us. Question for Dave. On the waterfront, I've shown that film so many times to young people, and it still has an impact decades later. Method acting front and center. It was such a game changer, and I think it's such a great choice for the festival this year to show that, because that movie changed everything, didn't it?
It did. I mean, I think you can look at film acting, and it's pre on the waterfront and post on the waterfront. And Brando and the entire cast just revolutionized screen acting, bar none. And there was that kind of fast talking, and here we are, way that everybody was speaking beforehand, and then it was so hyper realistic. And authentic after that, which I think is exciting to see. Of course, I always love situations where someone wins an Oscar for acting for their first screen performance, and Eva Marie Saint fits that bill. And she's someone that a lot of us at TCM have gotten to meet over the years and talk to, and she's super fun and flirtatious and just divine. But yeah, I just think the movie, just the themes of the movie speak to the kind of cyclic political times that we've been living in. So it's always a great movie to watch. It's a movie that I studied in college and wrote a term paper on, the score particularly. I was very proud of my A+ that I got on that term paper, I will say. But yes, I'm always happy to see it. We show it a lot on TCM, and I think it's a perennial favorite.
And my follow-up with Jackie is, the U.S. versus Billie Holiday received so much tension last year, especially at the Golden Globes, but it all began in 1972 with Lady Sings the Blues, didn't it?
Right. Yes. I mean, Billie Holiday is, I would say, one of the most important artists of the 20th century. Her story is not completely told, even with these two films that have been dedicated to her career. We get facets of it. But yes, absolutely. I think that it is really important to note that Diana Ross was nominated for an Oscar for her performance. First film performance, Dave. So it falls into the category you were just talking about. Same for Andra Day, right? And it is no accident that they brought the kind of like energy and complexity to those performances inspired by Billie Holiday. It's just a testament to her importance as an artist and the ways that her life story shows us how Black women artists in particular fought so many battles, and personal and professional, and yet they had a kind of resilience and determination to navigate really difficult circumstances. So I'm thrilled that we're showing Lady Sings the Blues at the festival this year, because I think it's an important film to contextualize this newer film that folks are rightly checking out and celebrating.
Okay, let's do Jim Alexander.
Hey guys, Dave, been a longtime fan of your on-camera red carpet work, and Jacqueline's such a great movie historian. So excited to talk to you guys and kind of pick your brain here. Turner Classic Movies stands for the classics, and there's no such thing as, I guess, a classic can be made in any era. But I'm curious with the way the industry is now, with everything going streaming and with kind of the superheroes taking over. What is the future of classic cinema when now there's a lot of the classics, I guess we get today's day, are indies, kind of low budget, smaller movies are kind of becoming a classic because a lot of the big budget stuff is, to explosions in a sense and superhero. Where do you see the future of classic cinema in a sense going now with the industry changing so much, especially over the last decade? Where do you kind of see classic cinema? Is it going to be rare to find that gem, or is it still out there? We're just going to have to dig in deeper through now the indies, which are available to us. We can find them pretty much anywhere. Where do you kind of see it? I'm going to start off with you, Dave, and then love to hear your thoughts, Jacqueline, on the future of classic movies in a sense.
I think if you look at any of the 8 movies that were nominated for Best Picture this year, instant classics and movies that I could see us showing even 15, 20 years from now as part of a Oscar series or a TCM Film Festival in the not too distant future. And that's one of the things I really like about the TCM Festival, is that it opens the tent to movies from the last 10 or 20 or 30 years, which you don't often see on TCM, the network. And I think a movie like Antoine Fisher or Once deserves to be perceived and seen as a modern classic. But you're right. I mean, if you think of the big budgeted films of the past, Cleopatra, Dr. Zhivago, Lawrence of Arabia, Ben-Hur, Quo Vadis, those are movies that lend themselves to a classic terminology, whereas I don't know if Wonder Woman is going to fit that bill. Raiders of the Lost Ark certainly does. So it's going to be fascinating to see how tastes change and how history views some of these films. But then I think you can look at Black Panther, and I think that's a movie that will be deemed a modern classic not too long from now. So I think some filmmakers like Ryan Coogler, for instance, have really proven that you can take a genre film and give it the quality that will allow it to be considered a classic later.
This is such a great question. It's such a complex question because
Sorry.
No, it's wonderful. I love when students in my classes ask questions like this. So it's really fantastic because you're asking a question about kind of genre in a way. Like, are there certain genres that lend themselves to classic status, which Dave was just getting to? But when Dave was starting off looking at the nominees this year for Best Picture, I mean, how are we defining what a classic is? It seems like a big aspect of that, to my mind, is a film that people want to return to again and again and again. And that might not necessarily be a big budget. That may not be the definition of classic that we're talking about, but instead, it's the kind of film that people really feel as though it means something to them, that it resonates with their experiences, or they feel like they're always learning something from it. And, I really love the programming that we're featuring in the festival, the Discoveries category that's going to be on HBO Max, because that's kind of like an area of these films should be classics. We should be thinking about these films as classics. And for some people, they are. For some people, The Decline of Western Civilization from 1981, this profile of the punk scene in LA by Penelope Spheris, amazing film, is a classic. And to put that alongside some of the, the Maltese Falcon or North by Northwest or something, and to say, what do we mean by classic? So it really activates exactly the kind of conversation that your question is posing. And when thought about in that way, I think we're always sort of making new classics or proposing things as classics and kind of testing them out. And we know that sometimes films that were not, well regarded at all, people went back to them. Airing them makes people come back to them in important ways, right? Like It's a Wonderful Life was a film nobody was really thinking about until it fell into the public domain, and then it was on TV all the time. Now no one would question that this is a classic. So we're kind of like proposing films as classics in addition to just affirming things that people already think about as classics. And I love that the term classic can have that dynamic quality to it. That it doesn't mean that there's just like a canon of films and that's it, but instead we're constantly thinking about how we can expand it and change it and make it a part of contemporary conversation.
It is wild how fast the world is going. Like, I had a realization recently that, see if you can follow me here. The amount of time between Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with that iconic Marilyn Monroe number and the Material Girl Madonna video that paid homage to it, the amount of time between those is less time than between the Material Girl video and today.
Wow.
More time has passed since the video. And I think it's weird for all of us to think of something from our lifetime being considered a classic, but it is.
That's right.
And I think people need to, it'd be helpful for people to kind of come to terms with that bizarre and often scary fact.
Well said. Thank you guys so much.
That was mind-blowing, Dave.
Jeffrey, back to you, and then Danielle, back to you after that.
Well, this is kind of a mini two-part question for both of you. This is my 26th year as a film critic, and I'm always asked what my favorite film is. And over the years, I had to give an answer, and I have to give it a two-part answer because one is for the average moviegoer who doesn't know classic film. So I have to say Jaws is my favorite film of all time. And then when Dave, you said Best Years of Our Lives, that changed my life when I first saw that movie. And so I say that for the classic film fan. So do you have a go-to answer of what your all-time favorite film is? And also, do you have a guilty pleasure film, one that just speaks to you that nobody else? Mine is Congo. I know that film. I just love that film, and I've reached out to Ernie Hudson and the directors. I just love Congo. But you say that to most people, they look at you like you're crazy. So that's my question for both of you.
Man, we're gonna admit our guilty pleasure movie. That's
You want me to go, Jacqueline?
Go, Dave.
So because people often ask me my favorite movie, and I have a two-part answer to that as well. I have a favorite classic film and a favorite contemporary film. So my favorite classic film is All About Eve, because I just love the whole behind the scenes of the theatrical world of it all and the relationships, and it's just so campy and fun. My favorite contemporary film is Lost in Translation, because I think Sofia Coppola and Bill Murray together is just a dream team, and I love the relationship between Bill Murray's character and Scarlett Johansson's character. It's one of a kind. My guilty pleasure is, even though it's an Oscar-winning film, I don't think it's a movie that gets the respect that it deserves. So that's why it's a guilty pleasure for me. And it's Children of a Lesser God, starring Marlee Matlin and William Hurt. And I think for whatever reason, it's not remembered. Whenever there's lists of the best movies directed by female filmmakers, it's never on there, which I think is bizarre. And that's a movie that I have always on my DVR, and I queue it up if ever I just need like a good cry.
Wonderful. So I'm thrilled that my real favorite film is showing at this year's festival as part of the LA Rebellion special collection. And it's Julie Dash's Daughters of the Dust, which I think is the most visually stunning film ever made. I think that it's a film that just breaks so many conventions of classic filmmaking. It doesn't follow one primary character. It covers a family. It doesn't seem to have like some clear, like kind of action that happens. Instead, it really is about getting to know these characters and their emotional landscapes. The cinematography by Arthur Jaffa is just stunning, all done with natural light. So I just think that it is an extraordinary film, and I'm thrilled that it's a part of what we're going to be featuring at the festival this year. For people who may not know or appreciate Daughters of the Dust, I really love the film Stormy Weather. I think it has just this pantheon of talent that comes together in, this way that really showcases artists who were struggling during that period of history. And it has, in the closing number with the Nicholas brothers, I think the most important dance sequence in any classic Hollywood film. And then you just take your pick of any Pam Grier movie for the guilty pleasure. Maybe I'll say Foxy Brown. I think that she just has this just incredible kind of bad innocentness that no one else has ever replicated. And it's just great to see the kinds of characters that she plays on film. So that's the guilty pleasure for sure.
Coffee.
And Dave, next time I see you at the TCM Fest next year, you have to tell me what Bill Murray whispered to her, but that's for another time.
I want to know. We'll never know. Never know.
Danielle, you want to hop in next, and then Gabe, I'll come to you.
All right. What would be your favorite year in film as far as classics go?
Oof.
Oh, that's such a hard question. Can I just give the easy 1939 answer? I'll just give that one the greatest year. And this comes from having had a lot of conversation about Gone with the Wind. And yet I still think that it's a film that raises such important questions, and it achieves so much in terms of its style and in terms of its box office and cultural impact. So thinking about that film, and of course, The Wizard of Oz, just the way that Technicolor was really opening up the ways that people could think about both the realism and the fantasy aspects of filmmaking. I think I'd have to stick with 1939.
Mine's not too far off. I would say 42. I love Mrs. Miniver. I know it's very sentimental and a little button pushing, but I think it's very effective by William Wyler. And there's a lot of other great movies that were released that year, like The Magnificent Ambersons was 1942. Talk of the Town, which is a great kind of intimate 3-character essentially film. Random Harvest is the same year. But the other reason I love 42 is because it includes one of my favorite unsung movies of all time, which is The Man Who Came to Dinner, a movie that we show occasionally on TCM, particularly around the holiday time, and a movie that I just tell everyone about whenever we show it, because I think Monty Woolley in that movie as Sheridan Whiteside is just so delicious and fun to watch. That's the classic movie that I can watch over and over again. So I love that year, and it doesn't get talked about. Oh, and Yankee Doodle Dandy is that year too. A great musical.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, you want to go next?
Absolutely. Since we have the great Jacqueline here, who's a great cinema historian, and Dave could jump in on this. In today's society, younger generations are criticizing a lot of different classic films, especially through culture and so on. I just recently read a criticism on Snow White animation because of non-consensual kiss. Birth of a Nation is completely wiped out. No one would dare watch a film like that, or a movie like Tootsie is now deemed, in the negative light. What do you think about slowly erasing those type of films from our history, or should we try to introduce it to the younger generation? How do we introduce it to a younger generation differently, that these are classic films?
Yeah, well, I would never advocate erasing the films. I think that the way that we can understand a question about like non-consensual touching in a film like Snow White is you have to see it. I mean, you can't even make an argument against it unless you've watched it and you understand the context in which those moments are represented. I think, everyone on this call is familiar with the fact that at TCM, we recently ran this Reframed series where we looked at films, specifically films that are appreciated, even beloved as classics. We didn't go to the outer edges to find the most racist films, the most sexist films. It's like, these are films that are praised in so many ways. But how can we talk about those aspects of the films that maybe many of us are more attuned to now? Because I think so many of us grew up watching these films and maybe recognizing some things were a little uncomfortable, but maybe not. And yet, as you started off with your question, younger people are raising these questions like, kind of, what's up with this? How was this okay? And you can only answer that question if you watch the films and you put them in their fuller context. So I'm sure that there are ways that this festival can be an ongoing part of the dialogue that we need to have about these problematic moments. I hope that the kinds of intros that we do and conversations that we have are giving people tools to talk about these films rather than just simply try to act like they didn't happen or make an argument that they shouldn't be seen. We can't possibly make change in the ways that we need to if we don't really understand how these problematic moments were created in the first place.
I mean, how can I even try to add to that? I'll just say that's why I wish Professor Stewart was my college professor.
Thank you.
She is my professor because I get to watch her and listen to her. So
Wow.
I get to all worlds.
I love it. Jim.
Back at it. I'm curious about the impact of international cinema and that it has on just not only TCM, but just in general in America and society, we've had two Oscars in a row where, you know, Parasite won, international movie won for Best Picture, which was kind of unheard of in the past, maybe not having an American movie won. And now we had, you know, Minari being just the influence of international cinema, and now our ability to be able to see it and the access to it that we probably didn't have more. Like, I'm Polish and I see so many Polish movies being like talked about as prominent movies that 20 years ago, that was never even a thought. You never thought of even Polish cinema in a sense. We're having this exposure to international cinema in general. How do you think that's impacted, in a sense, the classic aspect of movies as we view them in sort of the American way, as, you know, our American classics and sense, but now the international influx? How has it changed the game in a sense, and how will it be looked upon now that we have that access to international cinema and it's so prominent? Now we can enjoy it we've gotten used to, I guess, watching movies with subtitles in a sense where, you know, in the past we wouldn't even dare try that. Just kind of curious about the impact you believe international cinema has had and changed us. That's to Jacqueline and Dave.
Yeah, no, thanks for pointing to international cinema. I mean, the United States has never been alone in filmmaking. And while Hollywood continues to be described as the global movie making capital, we know that there are huge industries in other parts of the world. If we look at the Indian film industry, right? Like, in particular. And one of the things that's so rich about even classic American filmmaking is the number of directors and actors who came from Europe, right? Like, so Hollywood filmmaking, I would say, has always been deeply international to start off. And then you're right, there are so many ways that now audiences have more and more outlets for appreciating international cinema. And I think that that's just, it's like the distribution channels are finally catching up to what's been happening around the world all along. And I think it's a really beautiful, wonderful thing that now we have so much more access to global filmmaking. And we can see in so many ways that even those folks who have been making films all around the world, there is still kind of like a common language that people are drawing from, ways that Hollywood filmmaking has influenced filmmakers all over the world, and they're kind of taking up some of the same styles and challenging and questioning them. So I think it's just, you know, now what we're getting is a kind of like a really nice synergy where we can really begin to appreciate the through lines across different national cinemas. And I think it's a healthy thing, actually, for us to recognize that the United States is not the center of the universe, right, but is part of a global community, creative community in particular, and economic community, of course.
I'll just add really quick, because I know we're almost out of time. Only one of the last 10 Oscar winners for Best Director has been from the United States. Only one of the last 10.
Wow.
So that's Damien Chazelle. So I think,
Yes.
you know, international filmmakers have really risen to the forefront, and their influences have risen to the forefront. If you watch a movie like La Strada or Two Women, you appreciate the fact that these European films were not under the strict rules of the Hollywood production code. They were able to be more daring. So I think it's so exciting to discover European films, particularly classic era ones, because they can push the boundaries a lot more.
Well said.
Jeffrey, you want to hop in there for last?
Just real quick, I just wanted to say first, my DVR is full with the Saatchi Ray films from last night, because when I went to film school here at UNLV, but once upon a time in the 90s, I wanted to see Saatchi Ray's films so bad, but you couldn't see them. So I have my whole DVR to watch this weekend of those films.
That's awesome.
Second, Las Vegas is opening up 100% on June 1st. And as a Las Vegas native, I am so proud that you're showing Ocean's 11 because we're coming back, roaring back our city after having a horrible pandemic. So thank you for showing Ocean's 11. It means a lot.
That's great. That's great.
Thanks to you all.
Yes, thank you.
Today.
Thanks for the great questions.